for it was stated in the Holy Book that whoever was hanged on the wood was accursed. It is a cruel and an unjust blasphemy to attribute a curse to an eminent person like Jesus, the Messiah. For, according to the agreed view of all who know the language, la'nat, or curse, has reference to the state of one's heart. A man would be said to be accursed when his heart, having been estranged from God, becomes really dark. When deprived of divine mercy and of divine love, devoid absolutely of his knowledge, blinded like the devil, he becomes filled with the poison of unbelief. When there remains not a ray of divine love and knowledge in him, when the bond of loyalty is broken, and between him and God there arises hatred and contempt, and spite and hostility, so much so that God and he become mutual enemies, and when God becomes weary of him, and he becomes weary of God. In short, when he becomes an heir to all the attributes of the devil, and that is why the devil himself is called accursed. Footnote, see the lexicons Lisan ul Arab, Sikha, Juachar, Kamus, Mukhit, Tajul Arus, etc. It is clear that the significance of the word mal'un, namely accursed or accursed, is so foul that it can never apply to any righteous person who entertains love of God in his heart. Alas, Christians did not ponder over the significance of a curse when they invented this belief, else it were impossible for them to have used such a bad word for a righteous man like Jesus. Can we say that Jesus' heart was ever really estranged from God, that he had denied God, that he hated him and had become his enemy? Can we ever think that Jesus had ever felt in his heart that he was estranged from God, that he was an enemy of God, and that he was immersed in the darkness of unbelief and denial? If then Jesus had never been in such a state of mind, that his heart was always full of love and the light of divine knowledge, is it for you, wise people, to ponder whether we can ever say that not one but thousands of curses from God had descended upon the heart of Jesus with all their evil significance? Never. Then how can we say that he was, God forbid, accursed? It is a pity that once a man has given utterance to something, when he has taken his stand upon a particular belief, he is not inclined to give up that belief, however much the absurdity thereof be exposed. Desire to attain salvation, if grounded upon true foundation, is a praiseworthy thing, but where is the sense in having a desire for salvation which kills truth and which countenances, regarding a holy prophet and a perfect man, the belief that he had, as it were, passed through a state in which he had been estranged from God, and in which, instead of unity of heart and unity of inclination, there had been produced a strangeness and aloofness, enmity and hatred, and instead of light, darkness had surrounded his heart. Let it also be noted that this not only detracts from the prophethood and apostleship of Jesus, on whom be the peace of God, but it is also derogatory to his claim to spiritual eminence, holiness, love, and knowledge of God, to which he has repeatedly given expression in the Gospels. Just look through the Bible. Therein Jesus clearly claims that he is the light of the world, that he is the guide, and that he stands in a relation of great love toward God, that he has been honored by a clean birth, and that he is the loved Son of God. How then, in spite of these pure and holy relations, can a curse, with all its significance, be attributed to Jesus? No, never. Therefore, there is no doubt that Jesus was not crucified, that is, he did not die on the cross, for his personality did not deserve the underlying consequence of death on the cross. Not having been crucified, he was spared the impure implications of a curse. And no doubt it also proves that he did not go to heaven, for going to heaven formed part of this whole scheme, and was a consequence of the idea of his having been crucified. Therefore, when it is proved that he was neither accursed, nor did he go to hell for 3 days, nor did he suffer death, the other part of the scheme, namely, that he went to heaven, is proved to be wrong. On this point the Bible has more evidence, which I proceed to state below. This is the statement of Jesus. quote, "But after I am risen again, I will go before you unto Galilee." Matthew chapter 26, verse 32. This verse clearly shows that Jesus, after he had come out of the tomb, went to Galilee and not to heaven. Jesus' words, "after I am risen," do not mean his rising up alive after he was dead. Rather, as in the eyes of the Jews and the common people he had died on the cross, he used words beforehand consistent with what they were to think of him in the future. And indeed the man who was placed on the cross, in whose hands and feet nails had been driven till he had fainted from pain, had become as good as dead. If such a man was saved from such a calamity, and if he recovered his senses, it would not be an exaggeration on his part to say that he had come to life again. There is no doubt that after so much suffering, Jesus' escape from death was a miracle. It was no ordinary event. But to think that he died is wrong. It is true that in the books of the New Testament words of this kind occur, but this is a mistake of the writers of these books, just as they had committed mistakes in recording several other historical events. Commentators who have made researches into these books admit that the books of the New Testament have two parts. One, the spiritual instruction received by the disciples from Jesus, peace be on him, which is the essence of the teachings of the gospel. Two, historical events like the genealogy of Jesus, his arrest and his being beaten, the existence in his time of a miraculous pond, etc. These the writers recorded by themselves. They were not revealed. Rather, they were set down in accordance with the writer's own ideas. In some places there are undue exaggerations, as where it is stated that if all the miracles and works of Jesus were recorded in books, the earth would not be able to accommodate these books. How exaggerated is this statement? Apart from this, it is not against usages of speech to describe the great calamity which had befallen Jesus as death. When a man, having passed through a life and death experience, is ultimately saved from it, the common speech of all people expresses the idea by the idiomatic expression, "he was given a new life." And no people, to whatever country they may belong, would demur at expressing that idea in this way. After all that has been stated, it should be kept in mind that in the Gospel of Barnabas, which must be available in the British Museum, it is stated that Jesus was not crucified, nor did he die on the cross. Now we can very well say that though this book is not included in the Gospels and has been rejected summarily, yet there is no doubt that it is an ancient book and it belongs to the period in which the other Gospels were written. Is it not open to us to regard this ancient book as a book of history and of ancient times, and to make use of it as a book of history? Does it not follow from this book that at least at the time when the event of the cross took place, people were not unanimous as to Jesus' dying on the cross? Again, apart from this, when in the four Gospels themselves there are such metaphors as the one about a dead person, that he is not dead but asleep, it is not beyond reason to suppose that a state of swoon might be described as a state of death. I have already stated that a prophet cannot lie. Jesus compared his 3 days' stay in the tomb to the 3 days of Jonah in the belly of the whale. This only shows that just as Jonah remained alive for 3 days in the belly of the whale, so did Jesus remain alive for 3 days in the tomb. The Jewish tombs of those days were not like the tombs of today. They were roomy and had an opening on one side which was covered with a big stone. And presently I shall prove in due course that Jesus' tomb, which has been recently discovered in Srinagar in Kashmir, is of the same type as the one in which Jesus was placed in a state of swoon. In short, the verse I have just quoted shows that Jesus, after coming out of the tomb, went to Galilee. The Gospel of St. Mark says that after coming out of the tomb he was seen going on the road to Galilee, and ultimately he met the 11 disciples when they were at their meal. He showed them his hands and feet, which were wounded, and they thought that he was perhaps a spirit. Then he said to them, "Behold my hands and my